They mocked the human size. Until the apex predator knelt before him, reaches its stunning climax, when tiny Dr. Mara Quinn, defying all logic, steps between armed soldiers and the towering Strider. With trembling hands and unshakable courage, she kneels before the massive predator only for the beast to mirror her gesture, bowing its fearsome head in a moment that forever changes human-Strider relations. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The wind howled across the highland plateau, whipping red-gray dust over metal walkways that connected the research outpost's buildings. Dr. Mara Quinn adjusted her bright green coat, a splash of defiant color against the rust-red landscape of Qatar. Standing barely 1.5 meters tall, she was conspicuous, not just for her vivid outerwear, but for her diminutive stature among the larger researchers and security personnel who towered over her. "Little Mouse is heading back to her hole," she heard someone mutter as she passed the mess hall. Laughter followed, but Mara kept her gaze fixed forward, jaw set in determination. She'd heard worse throughout her career, much worse. What mattered was her work, not their mockery. The research outpost perched precariously at the edge of a vast jungle that stretched beyond the horizon. A tangle of alien vegetation in vibrant purples and blues that contrasted sharply with the barren plateau. The jungle was her laboratory, home to the most fascinating apex predator she had ever studied, a creature the team had nicknamed the Strider. In her cramped quarters, Mara reviewed her latest findings. Screens illuminated her face with a blue glow as she scrolled through data collected over the past 3 months. Supply drops were becoming less frequent. Corporate headquarters had made it clear that her continued funding depended on a major breakthrough this season. Without concrete results, her research would be terminated, and she would be recalled to Earth a failure. A violent gust rattled the ventilation system, making Mara jump. The sound triggered a memory of the Strider's roar, a sound that had sent shivers down her spine when she'd first heard it from a safe distance. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The stakes were too high for fear. Her neural implant pinged, displaying a message from Station Director Keller. "Progress report due tomorrow. Board expects measurable results." Mara closed her eyes. Her theory that the Strider represented not just an apex predator, but a sentient species with complex communication abilities remained unproven. Her colleagues had dismissed it as wishful thinking, a desperate attempt to secure more funding. But she knew there was more to these creatures than mere animal instinct. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by the howling wind and anxiety-fueled dreams of massive creatures stalking through tall grass. Always just out of sight. Morning brought no relief from either the dust or her colleagues' skepticism. As Mara prepared her drone for another survey flight, Dr. Harrison Porter, the outpost's senior biologist, leaned against the launch bay door. "Another day. Another data point that won't change anything," he said, his voice carrying that familiar condescending tone he reserved especially for her. "You know they're going to pull the plug soon, right? Maybe you should focus on something more attainable for someone of your stature." Mara ignored the barb, checking the drone's sensors methodically. The Strider has shown patterns of behavior that suggest intelligence beyond any terrestrial apex predator. Today might be the day I prove it. Porter laughed. "And I might grow wings. Face it, Quinn, you're chasing fantasies." She waited until he left before launching the drone, guiding it into the dense jungle canopy. Through its cameras, she watched the alien landscape unfold beneath her massive fronds swaying in the breeze. Bioluminescent fungi clinging to tree trunks that towered hundreds of meters into the sky. 3 hours into the survey, the drone's sensors picked up movement. Mara's heart raced as she adjusted the controls, bringing the drone to hover above a clearing where massive trees had been felled in a pattern too deliberate to be natural. Then she saw it, the Strider, standing nearly 5 meters tall on 6 powerful limbs, its body covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with each movement. But it wasn't alone. A massive herbivore, easily 12 tons of muscle and armored hide, grazed nervously at the clearing's edge. Mara's fingers flew across the controls, activating all recording functions. What happened next occurred so quickly, she barely had time to process it. The Strider moved not with the lumbering gait its size suggested, but with terrifying grace. It crossed the clearing in 3 bounds, each limb finding perfect purchase on the uneven ground. The herbivore had only begun to turn when the Strider was upon it, massive claws slicing through armored hide as if it were paper. The kill was instantaneous, efficient, almost merciful in its speed. Mara watched, transfixed, as the Strider began a complex series of movements around its prey, not feeding, but performing what appeared to be a ritual. Its front limbs traced patterns in the air while its throat sac expanded, emitting pulses of bioluminescent light. "This isn't predatory behavior," Mara whispered to herself. "This is communication." Her triumph was short-lived. The Strider's head snapped up, eyes focusing directly on the drone, as if it had heard her words across the kilometers separating them. It reared back, throat sac expanding to twice its previous size, and emitted a roar that caused the drone's audio sensors to spike into the red. The screen went black. Mara frantically tried to re-establish connection, but it was useless. The drone was gone, crushed or disabled. But it didn't matter. She had her footage, her proof. The Strider wasn't just hunting, it was communicating, perhaps even celebrating. This was the breakthrough she needed. Her hands trembled as she downloaded the data. Her small size might make her an object of ridicule among her peers. But today, she felt powerful, vindicated. She had stood virtually at least before a creature of immense power, and witnessed something no human had ever seen. As she prepared to present her findings, doubt crept in. Would it be enough? Or would her colleagues find another way to dismiss her work? The thought of failing, of being forced to abandon her research and return to Earth defeated, made her stomach clench. "I'm too small to stand against this level of raw power," she whispered, staring at the frozen image of the Strider on her screen. "And my entire career rides on proving my hypothesis." The outpost's conference room felt cavernous as Mara stood before her assembled colleagues. Their faces registered varying degrees of skepticism and boredom as she loaded her presentation. "Yesterday, I captured footage that will change everything we thought we knew about the Strider," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. The room darkened as the recording played. Mara watched their faces, hoping to see amazement, recognition of the significance of what they were witnessing. Instead, as the footage ended with the Strider's roar and subsequent static, silence filled the room. Director Keller broke it first. "Dr. Quinn, what exactly are we supposed to be seeing here?" "The ritualistic behavior after the kill," Mara explained, rewinding to the relevant section. "The movement patterns, the bioluminescent display, its communication, possibly a form of cultural practice." Dr. Porter snorted. "Or it's a sensor glitch. That drone model has been giving false readings since we arrived." "This isn't a glitch," Mara insisted. "Look at the consistency of the patterns, the deliberate—" "Dr. Quinn," Keller interrupted, "while your enthusiasm is commendable, we need concrete evidence. This footage is interesting but inconclusive at best." The meeting disbanded with murmurs of disappointment. Mara remained in the darkened room, the frozen image of the Strider still projected on the wall, its massive form a stark reminder of everything that stood between her and success. As the last of her colleagues filed out, one remained, Lieutenant Anders, the outpost's head of security, a mountain of a man with shoulders that seemed too broad for standard-issue uniforms. He had always intimidated Mara with his silence and stern demeanor. "I believe you," he said simply, his deep voice startling in the quiet room. Mara looked up, searching his face for signs of mockery. Finding none, she asked. Why? I've been watching them too, he admitted. From the perimeter. They move with purpose, not just instinct. He hesitated. I could help you get better footage. Security has access to more advanced drones. Hope flickered in Mara's chest. Why would you help me? Anders' expression remained impassive. Because I'd rather understand these creatures than hunt them, and the corporation's planning to start harvesting them for biomaterials next season. The revelation hit Mara like a physical blow. Harvest the Striders? The thought was abhorrent. They can't do that, not if I can prove they're sentient. Then you better get proof fast, Anders said, heading for the door. Meet me at the east gate at dawn. Bring your gear. That night, as Mara prepared for the expedition, an alarm blared throughout the outpost. She rushed to the common area to find Chaos researchers hurrying to secure equipment, while security personnel armed themselves. What's happening? She asked a passing technician. Perimeter breach in Sector 7, the woman replied. Something big. Took out the fence like it was made of paper. Mara's blood ran cold. Sector 7 was where she'd lost contact with her drone. She pushed through the crowd until she found Anders directing his team. Is it a Strider? She asked. He nodded grimly. And it's headed straight for us. Get to the safe room with the others. But Mara didn't move. Let me come with you. I might be able to help. Anders looked down at her, his expression unreadable. It's too dangerous. I know these creatures better than anyone, she insisted. Please. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. Stay behind me at all times. They headed to the perimeter breach, Mara struggling to keep up with Anders's long strides. What they found there defied explanation. The reinforced fence had been torn apart, metal posts bent like straws. But more surprising was the small figure huddled against the remains of a guard post. It was a juvenile Strider, no larger than an earth wolf, its iridescent scales dulled with dust and what appeared to be blood. It's wounded, Mara gasped, moving forward. Anders caught her arm. Careful. Where there's a juvenile, adults won't be far behind. But Mara couldn't tear her eyes away from the young creature. Its breathing was labored, and a deep gash ran along one of its hind limbs. We need to help it. Dr. Quinn. Look at it, Lieutenant. It's terrified. And it's alone. She pulled free of his grip and approached the juvenile slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The creature's head swiveled toward her, multifaceted eyes reflecting the outpost's lights. It made a soft, trilling sound, throat sac pulsing weakly with pale blue light. I'm not going to hurt you, Mara said softly, crouching to appear even smaller. Let me help. To Anders's visible shock, the juvenile Strider didn't flee or attack. It remained still as Mara examined its wound, only flinching slightly when she touched the injured limb. It needs medical attention, she said. We need to bring it inside. Absolutely not, Anders replied. It's still a predator, even if it's young. Mara stood her ground. It's evidence, Lieutenant. Living proof of the Strider's intelligence. It's showing trust that's cognitive processing beyond instinct. Anders hesitated, then sighed heavily. Director Keller will have my head for this. Together, they managed to transport the injured juvenile to Mara's lab. She worked through the night, cleaning and treating the wound while Anders stood guard, his hand never far from his weapon. By morning, the young Strider, which Mara had named Tikoa's, resting comfortably in a makeshift enclosure. Its scales had regained some of their luster, shifting between deep blue and purple as it watched Mara move around the lab. The emergency beacon's still down, Anders reported, returning from a brief check with his team. Something fried all our long-range communications during the night. Mara looked up from her notes. The Strider's sonic roar. It must emit an electromagnetic pulse that disrupts electronics. Convenient theory, came a cold voice from the doorway. Director Keller stood there, flanked by Dr. Porter and two security officers. What's not convenient is the unidentified alien predator in our research facility. Director, I can explain, Mara began. You've exceeded your authority, Dr. Quinn. Keller cut her off. That creature is corporate property and will be transferred to the secure containment facility immediately. It's injured, Mara protested. And it's not just property, it's intelligent. Porter scoffed. A wounded animal seeking shelter is hardly proof of intelligence. Then, why did it come here specifically? Mara challenged. To the very outpost where its territory was violated by our drone? It found us. Director, it sought us out. Keller's expression remained unmoved. Lieutenant Anders, remove Dr. Quinn from this laboratory. The specimen will be transferred under Dr. Porter's supervision. Anders looked between Mara and his superior, conflict evident on his face. But before he could respond, a low, menacing trill filled the room. Tico had risen to its full height, still small, but suddenly alert, its throat sac pulsing with rapid flashes of red and orange. It's warning us, Mara said quietly. It understands what's happening. As if to confirm her words, Tico moved to position itself behind Mara, eyes fixed on the newcomers. The message was clear, it had chosen its protector. Keller's confidence wavered visibly. Secure them both until we decide how to proceed. Lieutenant, you'll answer for this insubordination. As the door closed behind them, leaving Mara, Anders, and Tico alone in the locked lab, the first rumbles of thunder echoed across the plateau. The monsoon season had arrived early, and with it, a new set of challenges. What now? Anders asked, looking out at the darkening sky. Mara watched Tico, who had begun to make soft trilling sounds while pacing the enclosure. Now, we listen to what Tico's trying to tell us. The storm hit with unexpected ferocity, rain sheeting down in gray walls that reduced visibility to mere meters. The outpost systems struggled under the onslaught, lights flickering as backup generators kicked in. Mara used the confusion to her advantage, slipping out of the lab with Anders's help when the electronic locks temporarily failed. Tico followed close behind, moving with surprising silence despite its injured limb. We need to get to the communications array, Mara explained, as they hurried through dimly lit corridors. If I can broadcast my findings to the corporate headquarters directly, they can't pretend they don't know what's happening here. Anders nodded grimly. The array's on the far side of the compound. We'll have to cross open ground. In this? Mara gestured to the storm raging outside. It's perfect cover. But as they prepared to make their dash through the downpour, alarms blared throughout the facility. A computerized voice announced, "Perimeter breach, multiple sectors. All personnel to secure locations." Anders' comm unit crackled to life. "Lieutenant, we've got at least 3 adult striders circling the compound. They're testing the fences." Mara and Anders exchanged looks of understanding. The adults had come for the juvenile. "We can't stay here," Mara said. "If they breach the compound, there will be casualties on both sides." "What are you suggesting?" Anders asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "We return Tico to them, out there, in their territory." Anders' expression hardened. "That's a suicide mission. The plateau will be mudslides and gullies in this rain. And that's before we even reach the jungle." "It's our only chance," Mara insisted. "Tico trusts me. Maybe the adults will too." After a moment's hesitation, Anders nodded. "I'll get us transport to the edge of the plateau. After that, we're on foot." The journey to the plateau's edge was harrowing. Their small transport vehicle slid and skidded across mud-slick terrain, nearly toppling more than once. Tico huddled between them, occasionally emitting soft trills that seemed almost reassuring. When the vehicle could go no further, they continued on foot. The rain had transformed the usually dusty landscape into treacherous mudslides. Mara struggled to maintain her footing, her small stature making each step a battle against the elements. Anders moved ahead, his larger frame breaking trail through the worst of the mud. "Stay close!" he shouted over the storm's roar. They were halfway to the jungle's edge when Tico suddenly froze, head raised, throat sac pulsing with rapid bursts of yellow light. Before Mara could react, a massive shape loomed from the rain-swept darkness, an adult strider. At least twice the size of the one she had observed through the drone. "Don't move," Mara whispered, though her words were nearly lost in the storm. The adult strider regarded them with multifaceted eyes that reflected the lightning flashes. Its throat sac expanded, and it emitted a sound unlike anything Mara had heard before, not a roar, but a complex series of tones that vibrated through her chest. Beside her, Anders suddenly clutched his head, falling to his knees with a cry of pain. His neural implant was flickering, its diagnostic lights pulsing erratically. "Anders!" Mara knelt beside him, supporting his massive frame as best she could. "What's happening?" "The call," he gasped through clenched teeth. "It's doing something to the implant." The adult strider took a step forward, its attention now fixed on the suffering human. Mara positioned herself between Anders and the massive predator, knowing it was futile but unable to abandon him. "Please," she said, addressing the strider directly. "We're trying to help. We protected your young one." To her amazement, the strider paused. Its throat sac pulsed in a new pattern, slower and more deliberate. Behind her, Tico responded with a similar pattern. Understanding dawned on Mara with stunning clarity. The bioluminescent Calit's language. They're communicating. Anders groaned, still clutching his head. "Whatever they're saying, it's frying my neural net." Mara helped him to his feet. "We need to get you away from here. The strider's call must disrupt human neuroimplants." But as they turned to retreat, they found their path blocked by two more adult striders, their massive forms materializing from the storm like nightmares given flesh. "We're surrounded," Anders murmured, his voice tight with pain. Tico moved forward, positioning itself between the humans and its kind. Its throat sac pulsed in complex patterns, seemingly engaged in rapid communication with the adults. "It's defending us," Mara realized. "It's telling them we're not a threat." The standoff lasted for what felt like eternity. The only sounds the pounding rain and thunder. Finally, the largest of the adults, presumably the one they had first encountered, stepped back, creating a path toward the jungle. "I think they want us to follow," Mara said, helping Anders forward. "Into their territory? That's madness. We don't have a choice. Look." She pointed back toward the outpost, where lights were cutting through the storm vehicle headlamps, moving in their direction. "Search parties," Anders confirmed. "They've noticed we're missing." With no other options, they followed Tico and the adult striders into the jungle's edge. The canopy provided some shelter from the storm, but the terrain was no less treacherous. Steep slopes of mud and twisted roots threatened to send them tumbling with every step. Anders' condition worsened as they penetrated deeper into the strider's domain. The neural disruption had spread, affecting his coordination and speech. Mara supported him as best she could, her small frame straining under his weight. "Leave me," he slurred at one point. "Save yourself." "Not happening," Mara replied through gritted teeth. "We're getting through this together." The striders led them to a massive cave system carved into a hillside. Inside, the air was warm and dry, a welcome respite from the storm. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting everything in a soft blue glow. Mara helped Anders to a relatively flat area of stone, then turned to examine their surroundings. What she saw took her breath away. The cave walls were covered in markings, not random scratches, but deliberate patterns that mirrored the bioluminescent pulses she had observed in the strider's throat sacs. It was written language, preserved in stone. "They're not just intelligent," she whispered in awe. "They have culture, history. They're a civilization." As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she noticed more details. Niches carved into the walls contained object stools crafted from bone and stone, vessels made from hardened resin, even what appeared to be artistic representations of striders and other creatures. Tico approached, its wound already healing faster than Mara would have thought possible. It trilled softly, throat sac pulsing in a pattern that seemed almost gentle. "You brought us here to show us this," Mara said, understanding dawning. "You wanted us to see who you really are." The largest adult strider moved forward, its massive form dwarfing her. It lowered its head until its multifaceted eyes were level with hers, and emitted a complex series of pulses that she could feel resonating in her chest. Beside her, Anders groaned. "What's it doing?" "I think—" Mara hesitated, hardly daring to believe her own conclusion. "I think it's asking for help." Before she could elaborate, a new sound penetrated the cave, the whine of engines approaching through the storm. The search parties from the outpost had tracked them. The adult striders immediately moved toward the cave entrance, throat sacs pulsing with warning patterns. Tico remained with Mara and Anders, trilling anxiously. "They're going to attack the search party," Anders realized, struggling to his feet despite the pain. "We have to stop them." Mara nodded, already moving toward the cave entrance. "We need to make them understand before it's too late." They emerged into the storm to find chaos unfolding. 4 outpost vehicles had arrived, disgorging armed security personnel, who were now forming a perimeter. Among them, Mara spotted Director Keller and Dr. Porter, both wearing expressions of determined hostility. "Dr. Quinn!" Keller shouted when she spotted them. "Step away from those creatures immediately!" "Director, please," Mara called back, raising her voice above the storm. "There's been a misunderstanding. The Striders aren't a threat. They're an intelligent species trying to protect their home." "Secure the specimens," Porter ordered the security team. "Particularly the juvenile's neural tissues will be invaluable for study." The adult Striders responded to the aggressive movement with warning displays, throat sacs pulsing with rapid red flashes. The security team raised their weapons, tension building like electricity in the air. "Stop this!" Mara placed herself between the two groups, knowing how futile the gesture was. "I can prove their intelligence. Just give me a chance." But events had already been set in motion. A nervous security officer fired a tranquilizer dart, striking one of the adult Striders. The creature roared in pain, its sonic blast causing everyone with neural implants to double over in agony. In the confusion, Porter and 2 security officers moved toward Tico, who had emerged from the cave behind Mara. They deployed a containment net, the metallic mesh crackling with electricity, designed to subdue without killing. "No!" Mara lunged forward, but a security officer easily restrained her, lifting her off her feet as if she weighed nothing. "Your interference ends now, Dr. Quinn," Porter said coldly, as Tico thrashed in the net, its trills of distress cutting through the storm's roar. Mara fought against her captor with every ounce of strength her small frame possessed. But it was useless. She watched helplessly as they loaded the captured juvenile into a reinforced transport container. "The adults are retreating!" someone shouted. And indeed, the massive Striders were backing away, throat sacs pulsing with patterns Mara now recognized as distress and confusion. "They don't understand what's happening," she realized. "They trusted us because of Tico, and now we've betrayed that trust." As the security team prepared to return to the outpost with their prize, Anders appeared at Mara's side. He had recovered enough to move, though his face was still pale with pain. "What's the plan?" he asked quietly. Mara's mind raced. "We need to free Tico, tonight, before they begin their tests." Anders nodded grimly. "The containment facility has limited security at night. I can get you in." The journey back to the outpost was silent and tense. Mara and Anders were separated, each treated as prisoners rather than colleagues. The storm continued unabated, as if the planet itself was expressing outrage at the humans' actions. Once back at the facility, Mara was confined to her quarters, a guard posted outside her door. But Anders had planned for this, slipping her a keycard before they were separated. She waited until the outpost's night cycle began, when the reduced staff would be focused on monitoring the perimeter rather than internal security. The keycard worked as promised, allowing her to slip past her guard during a shift change. Moving silently through dimly lit corridors, she made her way to the containment facility where Tico was being held. Anders met her at a service entrance, his massive frame somehow managing to blend with the shadows. "They've got 2 guards inside," he whispered, "and Porter's still working, running preliminary tests." Mara's stomach churned at the thought of what those tests might entail. "How do we get past them?" "We don't need to." Anders produced a small device. "Emergency system override. It'll trigger alarms in the north sector, draw them away, long enough for us to get to Tico." The plan worked perfectly. As alarms blared across the facility, Mara and Anders slipped into the containment area. They found Porter hurrying toward the exit, presumably to secure his research during the apparent emergency. Tico was in a reinforced enclosure, throat sac pulsing weakly with distress signals. The creature perked up visibly when it spotted Mara, emitting a soft trill of recognition. "Hurry," Anders urged as he worked to override the enclosure's locks. "The security team will realize it's a false alarm soon." The moment the enclosure opened, Tico bounded out, pressing against Mara's legs like an oversized alien cat seeking comfort. She knelt, examining the creature quickly for signs of injury or sedation. "They've attached some kind of neural monitor," she noted, pointing to a small device affixed to Tico's head. "We need to remove it before we leave. It could be tracking us." Anders produced a small tool from his pocket. "Hold it steady." Mara cradled Tico's head as Anders carefully detached the device. The moment it came free, Tico's throat sac pulsed with bright, clear light, a signal of relief or perhaps gratitude. "Now we need to get out of here, back to the cave system," Mara said. "If I can document what I saw there, it will be proof of the Strider's intelligence that not even Porter can dismiss." But as they turned to leave, they found their path blocked. Director Keller stood in the doorway, accompanied by 4 armed security officers. "I'm disappointed, Lieutenant Anders," Keller said coldly. "I expected better from you." "Director, please." Mara stepped forward. "The Striders aren't just animals. They have language, culture, art. They're sentient beings with rights." "They are valuable research specimens," Keller cut her off, "and potential sources of biomaterials worth billions. The corporation has made its decision. Dr. Quinn, your objections are noted but irrelevant." Anders moved slightly, positioning himself between Mara and the security team. "Then we have nothing more to discuss." What happened next occurred with such speed that Mara barely had time to register it. Tico emitted a piercing trill, not a distress call, but something else. Something deliberate and powerful. The sound resonated through the facility, causing everyone with neural implants to wince in pain. Then the wall shook, and a terrible roar echoed from outside. An alarm blared. "Perimeter breach! Multiple sectors! All personnel to defensive positions!" Keller's face drained of color. It called the adults. Chaos erupted throughout the facility. The lights flickered and died as something massive struck the main power generator. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow as security teams scrambled to defend against the incoming threat. "We need to get out of here," Anders said, grabbing Mara's arm. "Now!" They fled through corridors filled with panicking researchers and security personnel, too preoccupied with their own survival to stop them. Outside, the storm had intensified, turning the compound into a battlefield obscured by rain and darkness. Through the chaos, Mara spotted at least 5 adult Striders, their massive forms moving with terrifying purpose through the compound. Their bioluminescent throat sacs pulsed with coordinated patterns, clearly communicating a battle strategy. "They're not attacking randomly," Mara realized. They're targeting the security systems, the weapons depots. They know exactly what they're doing. Anders pulled her toward a small transport vehicle. We need to get to the jungle edge. It's our only chance. But Mara hesitated, watching as a strike team assembled near the main building, heavily armed personnel, preparing to engage the Striders with lethal force. I can't let this happen, she said. Too many will die on both sides. Before Anders could stop her, Mara changed direction, heading straight for the strike team with Tico close behind. Her small size allowed her to slip past the chaos unnoticed until she reached the team's commander. Stand down, she ordered with an authority that belied her stature. These creatures are intelligent beings defending their own. We provoked this attack by capturing one of their young. The commander scoffed. Get out of here, civilian! We have our orders. Your orders will get you killed, Mara insisted. These aren't mindless animals. They're communicating, coordinating. Look at their attack pattern. Indeed, the Striders were systematically disabling the outpost's defenses while avoiding direct confrontation where possible. It was a precision strike, not a frenzy. Before the commander could respond, the largest Strider appeared through the rain, its massive form silhouetted against the facility's burning power plant. It moved with purpose, directly toward them, ignoring easier targets along the way. The strike team raised their weapons, but Mara stepped forward, placing herself directly in their line of fire. No! Let me try something first. Without waiting for permission, she moved toward the approaching Strider. Tico followed, trilling softly in what seemed like reassurance. What the hell is she doing? Someone murmured behind her. Committing suicide, another answered. But Mara kept moving forward, each step a defiance of her fear. She thought of all the times she had been dismissed because of her size, all the mockery and doubt she had endured. Small hands can hold the heaviest truths, her mother had told her once. The memory gave her strength as she stood before the towering predator. The adult Strider loomed over her, claws dripping with red dust mud turned to slurry by the rain. Its multifaceted eyes reflected the flames from the burning generator, giving it a demonic appearance that made Mara's heart pound in her chest. Slowly, deliberately, she knelt before the creature, placing a trembling hand on the ground in a gesture of submission. Then, gathering all her courage, she reached up toward the Strider's massive head. Time seemed to suspend as her small hand hung in the space between them, a fragile bridge between two worlds. Behind her, she could hear the strike team's weapons powering up, ready to fire at the slightest provocation. Then, to the astonishment of all watching, the Strider lowered itself, actually knelt before Mara, bringing its head down to her level. Its throat sac pulsed with gentle blue light, a stark contrast to the red warning signals it had been emitting moments before. With her heart in her throat, Mara placed her hand on the creature's snout. The scales were warm beneath her palm, vibrating slightly with each breath the massive being took. We can coexist, she said softly. We can learn from each other. Behind her, the strike team had lowered their weapons, stunned into inaction by the scene before them. Even Director Keller and Dr. Porter, who had arrived to oversee the defense, stood speechless. Mara turned to face them, her hand still resting on the Strider's snout. This is your proof, she called out. An apex predator capable of choosing peace over violence. If that's not sentience, what is? The moment was captured by dozens of recording devices, researchers documenting this unprecedented interaction between human and alien predator. Mara knew that these images would be transmitted across the corporate network, making it impossible for Keller or Porter to deny what had occurred. As if understanding the significance of the moment, the Strider raised its head and emitted a complex series of bioluminescent pulses. Around the compound, the other adults responded in kind, ceasing their attack and retreating to form a perimeter. They're waiting, Mara explained, moving back toward the human group, giving us a chance to choose peace. Director Keller stepped forward, her expression a mixture of fear and calculation. Even if what you say is true, the corporation won't simply abandon this research outpost. There's too much invested here. Then propose an alternative, Mara suggested. A conservation program. Supervised study rather than exploitation. The knowledge we could gain from peaceful interaction with the Striders would be worth far more than biomaterials. Anders moved to Mara's side, his imposing presence lending weight to her words. And consider the public relations angle. Director, footage of corporation mercenaries slaughtering intelligent beings won't play well on Earth. This, he gestured to Mara and the kneeling Strider, this is the kind of story people can rally behind. Keller hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. I'll recommend a change of approach to headquarters, but I can't promise they'll listen. They will, Mara said with newfound confidence. Because I'm broadcasting this encounter live across all corporate channels. It's too late to cover it up. Indeed. The communications specialist at Keller's side confirmed it with a nod. Feed is going out on all frequencies. Ma'am, half the board is already watching. In the days that followed, the confrontation at the research outpost became a turning point in human-Strider relations. Corporate headquarters, faced with overwhelming evidence of the Strider's intelligence and an unexpected public fascination with the small scientist and the giant guardian, announced a new initiative, the Qatar Conservation Sanctuary, with Dr. Mara Quinn appointed as lead researcher. The new approach wasn't without challenges. Trust between humans and Striders built slowly, with setbacks and misunderstandings along the way. But with Tico serving as an intermediary, genuine communication began to develop. Mara threw herself into the work, developing a rudimentary translation of the Striders' bioluminescent language. She discovered that their name for themselves translated roughly to the Watchers, and that they had been observing the human outpost with as much curiosity as fear. 6 months after the confrontation, Mara sat beside a campfire at the edge of the jungle, now designated as neutral ground. Anders sat beside her, his massive frame a comforting presence in the alien night. Tico, now nearly twice its original size but still small for a Strider, lounged nearby, occasionally emitting soft trills of contentment. You ever miss being back on Earth? Anders asked, poking at the fire with a stick. Mara considered the question, watching the twin moons of Qatar rise above the jungle canopy. Not really. I was always an outsider there, too small to be taken seriously, too stubborn to give up. And now you're the most famous xenobiologist in human space, Anders observed with a rare smile. Funny how things work out. It wasn't about fame, Mara replied. It was about being right, about seeing what others couldn't or wouldn't see. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant call, the harmonious roar of the Strider pack, echoing across the plateau. Tico rose to its feet, throat sac pulsing in response, but it made no move to leave. What are they saying? Anders asked. Mara listened carefully, interpreting the complex patterns of sound and light. It's part of their evening ritual, a recognition of boundaries and alliances, she smiled. They're acknowledging us, counting us among their allies. Anders nodded thoughtfully. I never thought I'd feel safer knowing there are 5-meter predators watching over us. Size isn't everything, Mara said, thinking of how her own small stature had allowed her to approach the Striders without being perceived as a threat. Sometimes, being small is an advantage. As if to emphasize her point, Tico moved closer, gently pressing its head against her shoulder in a gesture she had come to recognize as affection. The creature that could tear apart armored herbivores with ease now showed such gentleness with her that it still amazed her. I used to hate being called the little mouse, Mara admitted. But mice are resilient. They survive where larger creatures can't. They adapt. She reached up to stroke Tico's scales. And Sometimes, they make friends in unexpected places. The Strider Pack called again, their voices blending into a haunting chorus that resonated across the plateau. This time, Tico answered, its younger voice joining the harmony. And to Anders's visible surprise, Mara added her own voice, a clear, high call that mimicked the Strider's tonal patterns. In the light of the alien moons, human and Strider voices mingled in a promise of cooperation and mutual guardianship. The sound carried across the plateau, through the research outpost where humans listened in wonder, and into the deep jungle where Striders acknowledged the strange new alliance. Mara Quinn, once mocked for her small stature, had bridged a gap between worlds that had seemed insurmountable. She had proven that true strength comes not from physical power or domination, but from respect, humility, and the courage to see beyond appearances. As the calls faded into the night, Mara gazed up at the stars, visible through breaks in the storm clouds. Somewhere up there, Earth seemed impossibly distant and small, a reminder that perspective changes everything. What had once seemed overwhelming obstacles were now merely challenges to overcome through understanding and patience. The wind still whipped red-gray dust across the plateau, but it no longer seemed hostile or alien. This was home now, a place where being small didn't mean being powerless, where intelligence and empathy proved stronger than brute force, and where even apex predators could learn to kneel before the right kind of strength.